Court verdict declares, human male must marry the alien granddaughters of the consul. Tentacles, scales, bioluminescent skin, and odd, shimmering shapes moved quietly in the massive room. The high dome above reflected soft lights, casting long shadows over the polished floor. The air was tense. Every creature waited for the verdict that could change his life forever. Ethan was a human diplomat. He had traveled through 10-star systems, negotiated dozens of treaties, and survived more dangers than most aliens could imagine. Yet here he was, on trial for a misunderstanding so absurd that even he struggled to explain it. The charge: insulting the consul's family. Ethan shook his head. It wasn't an insult. I just laughed at the wrong joke. The alien judge, a towering figure with 4 eyes and a voice that resonated like a low earthquake, leaned forward. Mr. Carter, your defense has been noted. Yet your actions have offended the honor of Consul Vilar's lineage. The court has reached its verdict. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. He had faced pirates, rogue AI warships, and even an exploding starbase. But this was something else. The gavel, if it could be called that, more like a glowing crystal suspended in midair, descended. The court declares, Ethan Carter shall marry the consul's granddaughters, Lyra and Celia, to restore honor and political harmony. A stunned silence fell over the hall. Some aliens blinked in confusion. Others whispered among themselves in odd musical tones. Ethan's mind froze. Marry the consul's granddaughters. He cleared his throat. Wait, I'm not, this isn't. The judge's eyes glowed softly. Your objections are noted, human. The law is clear. The marriage will serve to honor the consul's family and strengthen interstellar alliances. Ethan looked around. Lyra and Celia sat in a special section reserved for the consul's family. They were unlike any alien he had seen. Their skin shimmered faintly, like opal under light. Their eyes, large and bright, studied him carefully. There was curiosity there, maybe amusement, but also a challenge. Ethan swallowed. He had no idea how he would explain human culture to them, or survive theirs. After the court adjourned, an assistant led Ethan to a waiting shuttle. Your new home will be the consul's palace on Velaris Prime. The granddaughters will meet you there. Ethan exhaled slowly. Velaris Prime was known across the galaxy for its beauty and strangeness. Floating islands, rivers of liquid crystal, and forests of trees that glowed in multiple colors. Yet, despite the wonder, he felt trapped. He wasn't just traveling to a palace. He was walking into an alien culture he barely understood, with rules that could get him killed if broken. The shuttle hummed and lifted off. Ethan watched the stars blur into streaks of light as he reflected on the absurdity of his situation. Humans were adaptable, clever, and brave. He had survived worse odds, but could he survive alien matrimony, especially with someone who might consider him a fool? When he arrived at the palace, a massive structure of floating spires and rotating walkways, he was greeted by attendants. They spoke in a language of musical tones and clicks, which Ethan somehow understood through a small translation device embedded in his ear. Welcome, human guest, said one attendant. Consul Vilar awaits you. The doors opened to a grand hall filled with hovering lights. Lyra and Celia approached, their movements graceful and almost liquid. Lyra had a serious, observant expression while Celia's face hinted at a mischievous curiosity. You are Ethan Carter? Lyra asked in perfect galactic common. Her voice was soft, yet carried authority. Yes, Ethan said, bowing slightly. I guess I am. He forced a smile, though his stomach twisted in knots. I promise I'm more competent than I look. Celia laughed, a sound like chimes ringing in a soft wind. We shall see, human. We have been told you are clever. But cleverness alone does not guarantee survival here. Ethan nodded. Noted. I'm very good at surviving. The granddaughters exchanged a glance, and Ethan sensed a silent conversation. They were testing him, he realized, already judging him against their standards. Humans often underestimated alien intellect. He would have to be careful. The consul appeared then, a large figure with shimmering silver skin and 4 arms folded in front. "Ethan Carter," he said, his voice deep and echoing. "You have been found in violation of our customs. Yet the law allows for reconciliation. You are to live here, learn our ways, and unite with my granddaughters. Perhaps in time you will prove yourself worthy of honor." Ethan bowed deeply. "I will do my best, Consul." Over the next few days, Ethan's life became a whirlwind of alien rituals, lessons, and rules. He learned to eat crystalline fruits that tasted like electricity, navigate floating stairways that defied gravity, and bow correctly in 4 different postures depending on the time of day. Yet, the most difficult challenge was understanding Lyra and Celia. They were intelligent, sharp, and completely foreign to human ways. Lyra often questioned his decisions logically, testing his reasoning. Celia preferred riddles and challenges, laughing when he made mistakes but never letting him feel humiliated. One day, as they walked through the palace gardens, a river of liquid crystal flowing beside them, Celia asked, "Why do humans laugh at things that aren't funny?" Ethan thought carefully. "I think it's how we deal with confusion. When life surprises us or when we are afraid, we laugh. It makes it easier to face." Celia tilted her head. "Interesting. Perhaps humans are braver than they seem." Lyra's eyes met his. "Or perhaps foolish." Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe a bit of both, but humans survive. We adapt." The granddaughters didn't respond immediately. Ethan felt a small victory. His explanation had made them pause. They respected clarity and reason. Perhaps here in this strange palace of opal walls and floating lights, his human traits could earn him a place, not just as a guest, but as someone respected. That night, as Ethan lay in his quarters, he reflected on the court's verdict. At first, it had seemed like punishment. Now he realized it was a chance to show that humans could thrive even in the strangest, most alien circumstances. He smiled to himself. If survival and cleverness are enough to impress aliens, then I can do this. Little did he know, the galaxy was watching. Not all were pleased with the court's decision. Some factions whispered that a human should not wield influence over the consul's granddaughters. Trouble was already stirring, and Ethan's ability to navigate alien culture would soon be tested in ways far beyond etiquette and floating stairs. For now, though, he took a deep breath, ready to meet the next day and the next challenge. He was a human. Humans survived. And perhaps, just perhaps, he would turn this absurd verdict into a triumph that no alien would forget. The court's verdict had seemed like a curse. But for Ethan Carter, it was only the beginning of an adventure where his wits, courage, and human nature might just be the galaxy's greatest hope. Ethan Carter had survived pirate ambushes, asteroid storms, and rogue AI warships. But nothing had prepared him for life in the consul's palace. Each day was a test, not of strength, but of patience, observation, and human ingenuity. The palace was alive. Floors shifted silently, walls hummed with energy, and lights floated like stars in midair. Doors opened and closed on their own accord, and hallways sometimes twisted in directions that made no sense to human logic. Ethan had learned to keep a small notebook to track paths, or he would have gotten hopelessly lost within a day. Lyra and Celia were constant companions, though each in very different ways. Lyra was precise, calculating, and analytical. She measured his every action, noting mistakes and inconsistencies. Celia, on the other hand, seemed to delight in mischief. She would hide floating objects, rearrange light paths, or pose riddles that required thinking 3 steps ahead. Both of them were formidable, but Ethan found their challenges stimulating rather than intimidating. The first true test came in the palace dining hall. Unlike human meals, the hall offered dozens of dishes floating in midair, suspended by anti-gravity plates. The food ranged from glowing jelly-like spheres to crystalline fruits that vibrated faintly. Each dish required a different method of consumption. Some were inhaled, some absorbed through the skin, and some, surprisingly, needed to be listened to before they could be eaten. "Observe," Lyra said, gesturing with one delicate hand. "You may consume the dish only after interpreting its resonance." Ethan blinked. "Resonance?" Celia giggled, the sound like wind chimes. "Yes, it hums. The frequency tells you if it is safe. Eat too soon and you may, well, let's just say, you'll learn the meaning of embarrassment in new ways." Ethan approached a small floating sphere. He tilted his head, placed a finger near it, and listened. A soft vibration thrummed through his finger. Tentatively, he brought it to his mouth. It was delicious, sweet, tangy, and somehow filling without chewing. "Not bad," Lyra said. "You have patience. Humans sometimes rush, and rushing leads to mistakes." Ethan grinned. "I've learned the hard way. Rushing is usually how humans end up blown up, eaten, or diplomatically humiliated." Celia laughed. "You amuse me, human. Very well. You may proceed to the next lesson." The next lesson was far more challenging. Ethan was led to the palace gardens, where plants floated and glowed. Some were harmless, others emitted small electrical shocks if touched incorrectly. Lyra and Celia instructed him to prune a glowing vine that had overgrown one of the walkways. Ethan examined the vine. It wasn't enough to cut it with force. He had to trace its growth patterns, understand its rhythm, and synchronize his movements with the faint pulses it emitted. Mistakes would shock him, but success would result in a glowing flower blooming perfectly in the air. After several attempts, Ethan adjusted his movements to match the vine's rhythm. The vine shimmered brighter than ever, and a small flower bloomed, floating above his hand. "Impressive," Lyra said. "You understand harmony. Most humans fail here." "Most humans," Ethan repeated with a smile, "but not all, and definitely not me." Celia tilted her head, curious. "You learn fast, but do you understand why this matters?" Ethan thought. "It's not just about the vine. It's about understanding your surroundings, respecting them, and working with them, not against them." Lyra and Celia exchanged a glance. Ethan could sense approval. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but that unpredictability came with creativity. The girls seemed to recognize that, though they would never admit it outright. Over the following days, Ethan faced more lessons. He learned to interpret alien gestures, understand complex communication systems involving colors and light patterns, and navigate the palace's ever-changing hallways. Each success earned a small nod from Lyra or a soft chuckle from Celia. Each failure brought a minor shock or a riddle he had to solve to continue. One afternoon, as they strolled through a corridor of floating orbs, Ethan noticed a faint flicker in one of the palace's energy nodes. The flicker grew stronger with each passing minute. It was unusual even for a building of this complexity. "Do you see that?" Ethan asked. "Something is wrong with the energy flow here." Lyra tilted her head. "I see it, but it is minor. It will correct itself." Ethan shook his head. "No. If this continues, it could cascade through the palace systems. It could shut down navigation, gravity, even communications." Celia's eyes widened. "You are cautious. Most would ignore it." "I'm human," Ethan said simply. "We notice patterns, anomalies. We act before they become disasters." The girls followed him as he inspected the node. With some trial and error, and a bit of human improvisation using basic tools he carried, Ethan managed to stabilize the energy flow. The node glowed steadily again, and the hall's ambient lights returned to normal. Lyra and Celia were silent for a moment. Then Lyra spoke. "You saved the palace systems, with minimal resources. That is clever." Celia laughed softly. "Clever and brave. Perhaps humans are more useful than we expected." Ethan bowed lightly. "I do what I can. That's what humans do." That night, as he reflected on the day's events, Ethan realized something important. He didn't need to impress the granddaughters with charm or follow every custom perfectly. He needed to show value in ways that mattered, through cleverness, observation, and courage. The palace, despite its strange beauty, was also a place of political importance. Lyra and Celia were not just children of privilege, they were potential leaders. If Ethan could gain their trust, he could gain influence and perhaps ensure his survival. Over the next week, Ethan faced further challenges. One day, he had to interpret an ancient treaty written in a language that changed symbols depending on the reader's perspective. Another day, he had to solve a complex energy puzzle that powered the palace's defensive shields. Each task was impossible at first. But Ethan approached them as a human would, with observation, trial and error, and clever reasoning. Slowly, he learned to anticipate the palace's logic, its rhythms, and its eccentricities. With each success, the granddaughters' respect grew. Lyra would nod slightly when he solved a problem correctly. Celia would smile, sometimes even offer a hint, acknowledging his growing understanding. They began to see him not as an outsider forced into their lives, but as a capable human who could navigate their world. Then came the test Ethan had not expected, a social challenge. A visiting delegation of alien dignitaries arrived from a distant system. The delegation did not like humans. They considered them primitive, reckless, and untrustworthy. They immediately began questioning Ethan, making veiled insults about his species, and challenging his understanding of alien law and culture. Ethan stood tall. He answered each question calmly, logically, and politely, even when their words were meant to provoke. When one delegate tried to humiliate him with a complex riddle, Ethan paused, thought through it, and answered correctly. The delegation was silent, then grudgingly impressed. Lyra whispered, "You do not just survive, human, you thrive." Celia smiled. "Yes, and you do it without losing your dignity. Clever humans." Ethan felt a rare warmth. Perhaps this absurd verdict, being forced to live among alien royalty, was turning into an opportunity. He could learn, adapt, and maybe even leave a lasting mark on this society. That night, as he watched the twin moons of Velaris Prime cast soft light over the palace, Ethan realized he had changed. He was no longer just a visitor or a pawn in an alien political game. He was a participant. His human traits, curiosity, ingenuity, courage, and adaptability, were not disadvantages here. They were strengths. For the first time since the court's verdict, Ethan smiled freely. This palace, these granddaughters, and this strange alien world were not obstacles to survive. They were a place where humans could shine. Tomorrow, the lessons would continue. New challenges, new puzzles, and new dangers awaited. But Ethan felt ready. He was human. Humans adapt. Humans endure. And most importantly, humans never give up. The verdict that had seemed like a sentence of absurdity was now the beginning of a new chapter. Ethan Carter would face alien customs, court intrigue, and impossible puzzles, and he would not just survive. He would thrive. And in that thriving, he would show the galaxy exactly what humans were capable of. Ethan Carter had grown comfortable in the palace of Velaris Prime, though he never let his guard down. The lessons from Lyra and Celia had sharpened his mind, but they had also opened his eyes to the hidden dangers of alien politics. The palace was beautiful, alive with glowing gardens and floating halls, but behind the opulence lurked whispers of power, envy, and betrayal. The first sign of trouble came during a morning walk through the floating crystal gardens. Ethan noticed two palace attendants whispering near a maintenance node. Their bodies flickered with nervous energy, their gestures sharp and guarded. Ethan paused, listening. Through subtle observation, he realized they were discussing an imminent sabotage, a disruption in the palace's energy grid that could cripple defenses and leave the Consul vulnerable. He approached Lyra and Celia quietly. "Something is happening." "Someone wants to destabilize the palace," he said. Lyra's four eyes narrowed. "Do you know who?" "Not yet," Ethan replied, "but I can track it. Humans are good at spotting patterns." Celia's tail-like appendage twitched. "If you're right, we must act carefully." Accusing the wrong people could cause war between factions. Ethan nodded. Then we observe first, gather information before acting. Over the next few days, Ethan conducted careful surveillance, using human intuition combined with basic palace tools. He noticed small anomalies. Maintenance schedules shifted, energy fluctuations subtly altered, and certain guards were repeatedly absent at key moments. Finally, the evidence pointed to a faction of visiting alien diplomats who had arrived the previous week. They were from a neighboring system, ambitious and resentful of the Consul's influence. Their plan was clear. They intended to sabotage the palace's energy core during the upcoming council assembly, creating chaos and tarnishing the Consul's reputation. Ethan shared his findings with Lyra and Celia. We have to act before the assembly. If the core fails, the entire palace could collapse. The galaxy would blame the Consul and it could spark war. Lyra's gaze was sharp. Your analysis is impressive. Most humans would panic or act recklessly. Ethan smiled faintly. Humans are patient, we plan, we adapt, and sometimes we survive because we notice what others miss. The three devised a strategy. They could not confront the diplomats directly, it would alert them. Instead, Ethan proposed a series of subtle interventions, rerouting energy flows temporarily, creating false maintenance logs, and discreetly isolating the diplomats' access to sensitive systems. It required precise timing and flawless execution. When the day of the council assembly arrived, the palace was alive with dignitaries from dozens of systems. The halls shimmered with floating lights, and the energy nodes glowed in perfect rhythm. Ethan moved through the palace like a shadow, adjusting flows, monitoring nodes, and signaling Lyra and Celia with subtle gestures. At the climax of the assembly, the visiting diplomats attempted to trigger their sabotage. Alarms would have sounded, the core would have faltered, and panic would have erupted. But Ethan's interventions worked flawlessly. Energy pulses redirected, nodes stabilized, and the assembly continued without disruption. The diplomats' plan was exposed indirectly. Security systems captured minor anomalies, and the palace attendants confirmed the attempted interference. The visitors were publicly confronted, not humiliated, but clearly prevented from causing harm. The council assembly ended successfully, the consul's authority intact. Lyra and Celia observed Ethan with newfound respect. Lyra spoke quietly. You do not just survive in this palace, human. You influence it, you protect it. Celia added with a smile, and you do it cleverly. I admit I doubted you. But your methods, they are unlike anything we expected. Ethan shrugged modestly. I do what humans do best. We think, we adapt, we act when others hesitate. That evening, the palace held a celebration to honor the successful council assembly. Ethan, though still a guest, was acknowledged as a key contributor. Attendants, dignitaries, and even Lyra and Celia's peers treated him with respect. A human in the heart of alien power, being recognized not for force or wealth, but for intellect, observation, and courage. This was unheard of in many systems. Yet, danger still lingered. Ethan knew that others would be watching him more closely now, some with admiration, others with envy. Political intrigue was never finished. Each victory only drew new challenges. But he also knew that humans could handle such pressure. In the days that followed, Ethan was invited to council meetings, palace strategy sessions, and diplomatic discussions. Lyra and Celia stood by his side, their trust in him growing stronger. They even began seeking his advice on matters of custom, security, and interstellar negotiations. One night, as they walked along a bridge of floating crystal, Celia asked, "Do you really think humans can influence the galaxy?" Ethan looked out over the city of Velaris Prime, lights shimmering like stars in the dark sky. Yes, humans adapt, survive, and think in ways others don't. We make mistakes, but we also find solutions. That's how we survive and thrive. Lyra added, and you are proving it. Not by brute force, not by cunning alone, but by cleverness, observation, and courage. Ethan smiled faintly. Humans have a way of showing up where it matters most. Sometimes the galaxy doesn't see it coming. As the weeks passed, Ethan's reputation continued to grow. He mediated disputes between alien factions, solved logistical problems in the palace, and even proposed innovations to energy systems that impressed engineers and dignitaries alike. All the while, he maintained a light-hearted humor that made him approachable, despite being a human in a palace filled with sophisticated alien intellects. But with recognition came new challenges. Certain factions, jealous of Ethan's rising influence, began plotting again. Small, subtle sabotage attempts occurred, minor energy surges, manipulated information, and whispered rumors designed to discredit him. Ethan, however, anticipated these moves. Using a combination of human reasoning, careful observation, and collaboration with Lyra and Celia, he neutralized each attempt before it could escalate. One night, while reviewing palace records, Ethan discovered a particularly dangerous plan. A group of visiting aliens intended to release a virus into the palace's energy network, a virus capable of erasing critical system protocols, potentially trapping the inhabitants and leaving the palace defenseless. He acted quickly. Drawing on everything he had learned, he devised a containment plan. Working with Lyra and Celia, they isolated affected nodes, rerouted energy flows, and neutralized the virus. The palace remained safe, and the would-be saboteurs were discovered and quietly expelled. The granddaughters, who had once regarded him as an outsider, now viewed him as indispensable. Lyra, with her analytical mind, praised his strategy and foresight. Celia, with her mischievous personality, admitted with a smile that she had underestimated humans' cleverness. "Ethan," Lyra said quietly, "you have become more than a guest. You are a protector, an ally, and perhaps even a part of this family in ways we never expected." Celia nodded. "Yes, you are human, yes, but you are extraordinary. Perhaps humans are not as simple as we thought." Ethan smiled, a mix of pride and humility. "I'm just doing what humans do. We survive, we adapt, we act. And when necessary, we protect those we respect." For the first time since the court's absurd verdict, Ethan felt truly at home in an alien palace. The challenges had been immense, but he had proven something important. Humans could stand alongside the galaxy's most sophisticated beings, earning respect not through force or status, but through intellect, courage, and ingenuity. Yet, Ethan knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, full of danger, intrigue, and opportunities. If a human could navigate the palace of Velaris Prime, perhaps there was nothing he could not face. And so, as he walked through the glowing gardens, flanked by Lyra and Celia, Ethan Carter understood something profound. Humans were more than survivors. They were creators, problem solvers, and sometimes the unexpected heroes of alien worlds. The palace might be beautiful, mysterious, and sometimes perilous, but it was also a place where a human could shine, and Ethan intended to shine brighter than anyone expected. Tomorrow, he would face new trials, new challenges, and new opportunities to prove that humans could not just survive. They could change the course of galactic events. Ethan Carter stood at the balcony of the Consul's palace, looking out over Velaris Prime. The twin moons hung low in the sky, casting silver light over the floating gardens, the crystal towers, and the river of liquid light that wound through the city below. The palace had survived sabotage, political schemes, and even threats from distant factions. And through it all, Ethan had proven what a human could do: adapt, think, and act when others hesitated. He had come far from the galactic court, from the absurd verdict that had declared him a husband to the Consul's granddaughters. What had seemed like a punishment had transformed into an adventure, one that had earned him respect across the palace and beyond. Lyra joined him quietly, her 4 eyes reflecting the moonlight. "The assembly will convene soon. "Are you ready?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "I've never been more ready. Humans adapt, we face challenges, and we find solutions when others can't." Celia appeared moments later, her expression bright, mischievous, but serious. "And you've proven it time and again, human. Today is just the final step." The final step was a public council session. Word had spread of the attempted sabotages, the political schemes, and the intelligence Ethan had brought to light. Many alien dignitaries were curious to see the human who had survived the palace's trials, solved impossible problems, and helped prevent galactic chaos. As the council chamber filled, Ethan felt a mix of nerves and confidence. He had faced worse: rogue warships, treacherous pirates, and collapsing starbases, but this was different. This was diplomacy, culture, and strategy combined. And this time the stakes were not just survival, they were recognition. The consul entered the chamber, flanked by Lyra and Celia. His voice echoed through the hall. "Today, we recognize the contributions of a remarkable individual. Ethan Carter, a human, has demonstrated intellect, courage, and loyalty beyond what we expected. His actions have preserved the palace, protected the council, and prevented interstellar conflict." Murmurs filled the chamber. Some dignitaries whispered in astonishment, others nodded with approval. The human, once seen as an outsider and a liability, now stood as a figure of admiration. Ethan stepped forward. "Thank you, Consul," he said simply. "I only did what humans do best. We observe, adapt, and act. When necessary, we find solutions that others may not see. Today, the palace and its people were the ones I chose to protect." Lyra's gaze was sharp but approving. "You speak the truth, and truth is valued here." Celia added, "And courage, human. You act with it even when others hesitate." The council erupted in applause, a sound of recognition that echoed through the palace. For Ethan, it was more than personal triumph. It was proof that humans could earn respect in the most alien, sophisticated societies. Yet, even as the applause faded, challenges remained. A delegation from a rival system had arrived, their intentions unclear. Ethan observed them closely, noticing subtle signs of suspicion and minor attempts at manipulation. He knew diplomacy was a continuous test. Humans had survived the impossible, but they also had to anticipate the future. During the discussions, Ethan applied the same human logic and reasoning that had guided him through the palace. He interpreted hidden cues in speech, noted inconsistencies in data, and suggested solutions that satisfied multiple factions. Gradually, the rival delegations' hostility softened. They recognized the human's insight and began to engage with respect rather than suspicion. After hours of negotiation, the Council reached agreements that strengthened interstellar alliances, improved energy-sharing networks between systems, and ensured the palace's security. Ethan's role was clear. Humans could be trusted allies, capable of thinking creatively and acting decisively in high-stakes situations. Later that evening, Ethan walked with Lyra and Celia through the palace gardens, reflecting on the journey. "I never expected this," he said. "When the court declared me married to you, I thought it was a sentence. Now it feels like an opportunity, a chance to prove that humans can survive and even thrive." Lyra smiled faintly. "At first, we doubted you. We thought humans were weak, impulsive, and unpredictable. But you have shown otherwise." Celia's expression was playful. "Yes, and it is entertaining to watch a human adapt so quickly. You have earned our trust and, more importantly, our respect." Ethan chuckled. "Trust and respect sounds better than punishment." They walked in silence for a while, enjoying the soft glow of the gardens. Ethan understood that the verdict had not been punishment. It had been a challenge, a test that humans were uniquely equipped to handle. Observation, reasoning, and courage, these were traits that could change perceptions, even across species. The next morning, Ethan was summoned to the consul's council chamber again. This time, the matter was personal. The consul addressed him directly. Ethan Carter, you have done more than survive. You have earned the respect of this family, the palace, and now the council. The law that forced your presence here has become obsolete. You are no longer a guest under obligation. You are an honored ally of the consul family. Your actions have bridged cultures and proven that humans have value beyond measure. Ethan felt a rush of gratitude. He bowed deeply. Thank you, Consul. I am honored, and I will continue to serve, whether as a human, an ally, or a friend to your family. Lyra approached, her voice calm and measured. You have shown that humans are more than survivalists. You think, observe, and act with courage. That is why we trust you. Celia added with a teasing smile, and humans are stubborn, clever, and adaptable, qualities we respect. Perhaps even enjoy. For Ethan, these words were more than praise, they were affirmation. Humans were seen as capable, respected, and valuable. He had turned a court-mandated sentence into an opportunity to prove the worth of his species. In the following weeks, Ethan continued his work in the palace. He advised on diplomatic missions, helped design more efficient energy systems, and occasionally assisted in solving cultural disputes among alien visitors. Everywhere he went, his human ingenuity and courage were recognized. The consul himself invited Ethan to help plan an interstellar council meeting, trusting the human's perspective on strategy, negotiation, and problem-solving. It was unprecedented, a human influencing high-level alien politics through intellect rather than force or intimidation. One evening, while overseeing preparations for the council, Ethan looked at Lyra and Celia. You know, he said, I came here thinking I was a pawn. Now I feel like I'm part of something bigger. Humans can't just survive, we can help shape the galaxy. Lyra nodded. Yes, Ethan, you have proven that humans are not merely participants. They can be leaders, advisors, and protectors. That is why we respect you. Celia smiled warmly. And humans are clever in ways we never expected. You have changed our perception, human. That is a rare gift. Ethan felt a surge of pride, not just for himself, but for all humans. The verdict that had once seemed absurd had become a story of triumph. How a human could stand out, adapt, and earn respect in an alien world. Months passed, and Ethan's reputation spread beyond Velaris Prime. Other systems began to seek human advisors, diplomats, and problem solvers. Humans were no longer seen as simple or primitive. They were clever, adaptable, and courageous. Finally, one quiet evening, Ethan stood once more on the balcony, looking out over the glowing city. Lyra and Celia joined him, and together they watched the twin moons rise. You have changed this palace, Lyra said softly, and perhaps in small ways the galaxy as well. Celia added, yes, humans have a way of leaving a mark. Not through force, but through thought, courage, and action. You are living proof, Ethan smiled. Then let's make sure it's a good mark. The court's verdict that had declared him a husband to alien granddaughters was no longer a source of anxiety or humor. It was a symbol. A symbol that humans could adapt, thrive, and earn respect in the most alien and complex situations. Ethan Carter had not just survived Velaris Prime, he had changed it. He had earned the trust and admiration of Lyra and Celia, secured the palace against sabotage, and proved that humans could influence the galaxy through intelligence, courage, and integrity. And as he looked out over the glowing city, he knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, full of challenges, opportunities, and dangers, but humans were ready. Humans adapted. Humans survived. And sometimes humans thrived in ways that no one, not even the most advanced aliens, could have predicted. Ethan turned to Lyra and Celia, his allies, his friends, his bridge between worlds. Shall we see what the future holds? Indeed, Lyra said. Absolutely, Celia added. And together, the human and the alien granddaughters stepped forward into a galaxy where respect was earned. Alliances were forged, and humans had proven that their ingenuity and courage could shine across the stars.